The silent plea, the twin sons of Vestin. 4 painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as Administrator Thalen stood on the observation deck of the colony's central tower, below him the Kelhuri. People moved through their daily routines, unaware that their peaceful existence was about to shatter. The Kelhar were a gentle species, their slender frames and luminescent skin marking them as creatures evolved under kind stars. They had built this colony over 3 generations, transforming the barren plains into gardens that fed thousands. Phelan's communication device bust. His aide, a young Kelhar named Varys, appeared on the screen with fear in her wide golden eyes. The readings were wrong, she said, her voice trembling. Ships had appeared at the system's edge, dozens of them, and they were not responding to any hails. Thalen felt his blood turn cold. He had heard the warnings from neighboring systems, whispers of a species called the Zarathans, who swept through space like locusts, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing but ash behind. Within hours, the first Zaratha vessel entered orbit. It was massive, its hull covered in jagged metal that looked like the bones of dead worlds. No communication came, only a single warning shot that vaporized the colony's northern greenhouse in a flash of superheated plasma. Panic spread through the streets as more ships arrived, forming a blockade that cut Vestin off from any hope of reinforcement. The Kelhar Defense Force, equipped only with basic shields and mining tools converted to weapons, stood no chance against such overwhelming power. Phelan gathered his council in the emergency bunker deep beneath the tower. The room was cramped and hot, filled with frightened officials who looked to him for answers. He did not have their communications officer, an elderly Kelhuri named Morven, explained that their distress signals to the Kelhari home world had gone unanswered. The government was too far away, too slow to respond, and probably too afraid to challenge the Zarathans. Other nearby civilizations had already made it clear they would not risk their own safety for a remote colony. As the bombardment began in earnest, shaking dust from the bunker ceiling, Thalen made a decision that would change everything. He ordered Morven to access the ancient galactic emergency channels, the ones reserved for catastrophic events that threatened entire species. Morven's hands shook as he entered the codes, sending out a desperate plea into the darkness of space. The message was simple but carried the weight of thousands of lives. Colony Vestin 4 under attack. Civilian population in danger. Requesting immediate assistance from any available forces. The message traveled through subspace relays, bouncing from station to station, ignored by most who received it. Wars and conflicts were common in the galaxy, and few had the resources or courage to intervene in someone else's crisis. The signal grew weaker as it spread, nearly lost among the cosmic noise until it reached a small monitoring station on the far edge of known space. Maya Chin sat in the dimly lit observation room of Outpost Sentinel 7, nursing her third cup of coffee and reviewing sensor logs that showed nothing but empty space and distant stars. She had volunteered for this assignment, seeking quiet after years of service in Earth defense fleets, but lately the silence had begun to feel more like loneliness. When the alert chimed on her console, she almost dismissed it as another false positive. The message played through her speakers in a language her translator. Software struggled to interpret, but the emotion behind it needed no translation. Ma's training kicked in immediately. She enhanced the signal, traced its origin, and felt her heart sink as the full situation became clear. A civilian colony, non-combatants under attack by a hostile force with overwhelming firepower. She had seen this before in her early days as a soldier, and she had sworn she would never ignore such a call. Again, Maya opened a priority channel to Earth Command, her voice steady despite the urgency she felt. Emergency distress. Signal received. Civilian population under active assault. Request immediate protocol review and response authorization. The response came faster than she expected. Within minutes, her screen filled with classified military channels activating simultaneously. Admiral Jackson's face appeared, his expression grave but determined. Protocol Crimson is active, he said. All available fleets are being recalled. The Armada launches in 6 hours. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Protocol Crimson was legendary, created after humanity's first contact with the galaxy, when they learned how often civilizations looked away from suffering. Earth had declared that humans who had clawed their way up from a death world filled with predators and disasters would never abandon those in need. The protocol had only been activated twice before, and both times the galaxy had watched in awe and terror as humanity's full military might descended like thunder across Earth. And its colonies, military bases erupted into controlled chaos. Massive dreadnoughts that had been in standby mode powered up their fusion cores. Carrier groups assembled with practiced precision. Marines who had been training for scenarios just like this loaded into drop ships, their armor systems running final diagnostics. The orbital shipyards above Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn opened their docks, releasing destroyers and cruisers that had been held in reserve for emergencies. In the command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Jackson stood before a holographic display showing the entire Armada assembling in Earth's orbit. 247 ships, from nimble frigates to the massive dreadnought Indomitable, formed into battle formations. Thousands of personnel, both military and support staff, worked without rest to ensure every system was ready. Jackson knew what this meant. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had earned their reputation, why species whispered about Earth with respect and fear. Back on Veston 4, Phelan held Varys as the bunker shook from another impact. He did not tell her about the message they had sent, did not want to give her false hope. Above them, Zarathian soldiers had begun landing, their heavy boots crushing the gardens the generations had built. Phelan closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the stars, hoping that someone somewhere had heard their cry for help. Far above the planet, in the cold vacuum of space, reality began to ripple. The Zarathian commander noticed the anomaly first, a distortion in the sensor readings that grew larger with each passing second. Before he could order his fleet to investigate, the fabric of space tore open in a brilliant flash of light. Through the tier came ships, hundreds of them, bearing insignia the Zarathians had never seen before. At the front of the formation flew a dreadnought so massive it blocked out the stars behind it. Transmission cut through every Zarathian communication channel, delivered in a voice that carried the weight of Absolute authority. This is the Earth. Defense fleet responding to distress. Call Vestin 4, all hostile forces. Power down your weapons and withdraw. Immediately, this is your only warning. The Zarathian commander stared at the fleet before him and realized with growing dread that he had made a terrible mistake. He had attacked a colony under the protection of humanity. The species from the death world, the ones who had turned warfare into an art form born from surviving the impossible. The Armada held position, weapon systems hot but not yet firing, giving the Zarathians one chance to choose peace, but deep in the bunker on Vestin 4, Phelan heard the transmission echo through the colony's emergency speakers and felt hope kindle in his chest. For the first time in days, help had arrived, carried on ships from a world he had only heard about in stories, a world called Earth, thunder from Earth. The Zarathian commander's name was Thra, and he had led 17 successful conquests. Across 4 sectors, he was a creature of violence, standing 3 m tall with armored plates that had turned away blade and bullet alike. He had never retreated, never shown mercy, and never encountered an enemy that made him question his superiority. That changed the moment he saw the human armada materialize from subspace. Thrax, tactical officer, a younger Zarathian named Krell, reported that their sensors were being overwhelmed by the sheer number of human vessels. The energy signatures did not match anything in their databases. The largest ship, the one humans called Indomitable, registered power levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of any size. Thrak made a decision born from arrogance and the belief that his 200 ships could overwhelm any challenger. He ordered his fleet to attack. The first Zarathian volley lit up the space between the 2 fleets, plasma torpedoes and kinetic missiles racing toward the human formation. On board the Indomitable, Admiral Jackson watched the incoming fire with calm eyes. He had fought in the Titan Wars, survived the Siege of Callisto, and trained for exactly this moment. His voice was quiet when he gave the order, point defense systems active, show them what Earth builds. The space around the human fleet erupted with defensive fire, automated turrets locked onto incoming missiles with computer precision, destroying them in cascades of light. Energy shields, invisible until struck, shimmered into existence and absorbed the plasma. Torpedoes without strain, not a single human ship took damage. In contrast, the human counterattack was surgical and devastating. Railgun rounds fired from the Indomitable's main battery crossed the distance in seconds. Each shot guided by artificial intelligence that calculated trajectory, velocity, and target weakness simultaneously. 3 Zarathian destroyers exploded in the first salvo, their hulls torn apart by projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed. The remaining Zarathian fleet scattered, their tight formation breaking as panic set in. Thrax screamed orders, trying to rally his forces, but human fighters were already launching from carrier groups, swarming through the confusion like predators who had found their prey. Each fighter pilot was connected through Neuralinks to their craft, making them move with inhuman speed and precision. On the surface of Vestin 4, the Zarathian ground forces heard the battle raging above them and realized their fleet was losing. Their leader, a brutal soldier named Graf, ordered his troops to take hostages, believing it would force the humans to negotiate, he gathered a squad and moved toward the bunker where the Kelhuri leadership had taken shelter. They breached the door with plasma cutters, their weapons raised and ready to enforce their will through fear. But humans had already landed. Drop pods had fallen through the atmosphere like meteorites, each one carrying a squad of Marines in powered armor that made them look like gods of war. Lieutenant Sarah Akinquo led the first squad to reach the colony center, her helmet display showing her the locations of every civilian and hostile combatant within 2 km. Her team moved with practiced efficiency, clearing buildings and securing escape routes for the frightened Kelhur. When Grath and his squad entered the bunker, they found themselves face to face with Sarah and her Marines. The Zarathans were large and dangerous, but the humans were equipped with technology that blurred the line between soldier and machine. Sarah's voice came through her armor's external speakers, amplified and cold. "Drop your weapons and surrender. This is the only time I will ask," Grath snarled, and raised his plasma rifle. What followed lasted less than 10 seconds. The Marines moved with speed that seemed impossible for beings in such heavy armor. Grath fired, but Sarah's shield generator absorbed the shot while her teammate flanked left, firing stun rounds that dropped 2 Zarathans. Instantly, Sarah herself closed the distance, her armor's enhanced strength allowing her to rip the weapon from Grath's hands and pin him to the ground. With one arm, the fight was over before the other Zarathans could react. Phelan and the other Kelhari emerged from the bunker to find their attackers subdued and human soldiers standing guard. Sarah removed her helmet, revealing a face marked by scars and eyes filled with kindness that seemed at odds with the weapon in her hands. "You are safe now," she said in perfect Kelhuri, her translator working flawlessly. "We came as fast as we could." Thalen felt tears stream down his face, the weight of fear and responsibility finally lifting from his shoulders. Above the planet, the battle had turned into a rout. The Zarathian fleet attempted to retreat, but human ships had already positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. Admiral Jackson opened a channel to Thrak, his voice carrying across the void. "Your fleet is defeated. Your ground forces are captured. I am offering you the chance to surrender and face trial for your attacks on civilian populations, or you can choose to fight and be destroyed. Choose wisely." Thra looked at his tactical display and saw the truth of his situation. 3 orders of his fleet was destroyed or disabled. Ground forces were not responding to communications. The humans had achieved total victory in less than an hour. It was a humiliation beyond anything he had experienced, but it was also a demonstration of power that demanded respect. He powered down his weapons and transmitted his surrender. The human fleet began recovery operations. Immediately, medical ships moved to provide aid to both Kelhari civilians and wounded Zarathans. Engineers started working on repairing the colony's infrastructure. Marines distributed supplies and helped families reunite. It was not just a military operation, it was a humanitarian mission, executed with the same precision and dedication that humans brought to warfare. Days later, as the last of the reconstruction efforts continued, Phelan stood with Sarah on a repaired observation deck, watching the human fleet prepare to depart. He had learned much about these beings from Earth. In the short time they had shared, he learned that humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them in countless ways, from predators to diseases to natural disasters. They had survived by becoming adaptable, resilient, and fiercely protective of each other. Sarah explained that Protocol Crimson existed because humans remembered what it felt like to be helpless, to face extinction, to cry out for help that never came. When they reached the stars and saw other species suffering, they had made a promise: no one who calls for help will be ignored. No one who seeks mercy will be abandoned. We came from a death world, Sarah said, and we learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty. The Zarathians were taken to Earth to face justice, their leader, Thrax, standing trial for war crimes. The verdict would send a message across the galaxy that attacks on civilian populations would not be tolerated, not while humans had the power to respond. The Kelhar colony of Vestin 4 was rebuilt stronger than before, with Earth providing defensive systems and training so they could protect themselves in the future. News of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Species that had ignored the Kelhar distress call now watched recordings of the human response with a mixture of awe and fear. Some saw Earth as a new guardian, others as a potential threat, but all recognized that humanity had demonstrated something rare in galactic politics: the willingness to fight for others without demanding anything in return. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as it entered Earth's orbit, welcomed home by millions who watched the fleet return. He thought about the faces of the Kelhar they had saved, the children who would grow up because humans had answered their call. This was why Protocol Crimson existed, why the Armada trained endlessly, why humans refused to become complacent even in times of peace. On Vestin 4, Phelan initiated a new tradition. Every year on the anniversary of their rescue, the Kelhar would gather in the rebuilt Central Plaza and look up at the stars. They would remember the day they sent one desperate message into the void and received a response that shook the galaxy. They would remember that somewhere out there on a blue world that had forged its children in fire and hardship lived a species that refused to ignore the suffering of others. The message was clear to every civilization that heard the story. Earth had spoken, not with words but with action. Humans from the Death World had shown that strength was not measured only weapons and ships, but in the courage to stand between the helpless and those who would harm them. One SOS was all it took, and humanity had responded with everything they had, proving that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy was also the most compassionate.